This episode of the Beauty Industry Podcast was brought to you by Private Label Skincare.
Hello and welcome to the Beauty by ABIC podcast, your online support community for the aesthetic and beauty industry. Here, we are strengthening and unifying the industry through representation, innovation, and education. This is a platform created and dedicated to the aesthetic and beauty industry, valuing unity and advancement. We serve to represent, support, and inspire you by connecting you with industry experts, expanding your knowledge through educational pieces, and bringing you the latest industry news. This is Beauty by ABIC. Today's guest is Zena Dammous, cosmetic nurse specialist and director at Medical Aesthetic. Zena is also an advisory board member for ABIC and generously contributes her advice and expertise on the aesthetic sector of our industry. After graduating with a Bachelor of Nursing from Deakin University in 2008, Zena went on to work at the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne before transitioning to a full-time cosmetic nursing role in 2012. She then went on to complete her cosmetic injectables training in London with world-renowned Bob Khana, as well as training and working with some of the world's leading doctors and cosmetic specialists. Her approach is honest, highly ethical, and straightforward. Zena works with her clients to build strong rapport, and they trust her subtle approach, attention to detail, and opinion in helping them to achieve their aesthetic goals. After working in the business for so many years, Zena formally took over Medical Aesthetic in 2014 and has since transformed the business, expanding to multiple sites and growing a team of dedicated professionals who are equally as passionate about what they do as she is. Medical Aesthetic is a customer-centric business, focusing on client experience as well as exceptional treatment outcomes. Zena regularly attends conferences and maintains strong connections with industry leaders, with knowledge and education being highly valued by both her and her experienced team. Endeavouring to stay at the forefront of the industry, Zena consistently invests time and resources into learning from the best around the world. Here to talk to us about the impacts of trends in the clinic from Medical Aesthetic, today we welcome Zena Dammous. Welcome to the Beauty by ABIC podcast, Zena. How are you?
I'm good, Steph. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so wonderful to have you on board. I've been really looking forward to speaking with you today, actually. We start all of our podcasts in the same way, by going right back to the start of our guest careers. And I know you have a very interesting story. So for all of our listeners to learn a little bit more about you, can you tell us how you entered the professional beauty industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a funny story. I essentially was born into the industry. My mother went into labour while she was doing electrolysis on a woman's chin back in 1984. And she politely excused herself and drove herself to the hospital. And that was where my story started. So pretty funny.
Oh, goodness. I knew it was a good one, but I didn't know it started right at birth.
It did, yeah. Born in industry.
Oh, goodness. So tell us a little bit about, your entry into the professional beauty industry. What inspired you to follow into your mum's footsteps?
So I started by working after school on reception, and eventually my mum wouldn't start training me on the devices until I started my uni degree. She was very strict with that and made sure that I was going down the path of the qualification of at least nursing before she wanted to get me hands-on in the treatment room. So when I started my nursing degree at Deakin, I would go to uni basically from 9 till 3, and then I'd come down to the clinic and work from there till 9 o'clock. I started out performing all your basic treatments like your laser hair removal, IPL, photorejuve, microdermabrasion. And back then in my early 20s, a lot of the training was just hands-on. We had the trainers come out. They would show us how to use the devices. We'd have models. There wasn't the recognised education courses that there are today. So we're very lucky to see how far this industry's come in terms of the education that's out there now. But back then we didn't have that. So it was all about going to the expos, meeting the reps, finding out what was going on overseas as well. A lot of it wasn't in Australia yet. And we started with laser hair removal back in 99, and I think it was only TGA approved in 97. So we got into laser hair removal really early on, which was really great. But back then there was no sort of formal qualification for it.
Yes, that's right. I recall it was very much learn as you go type of scenario, wasn't it?
It was.
And so your passion developed for the industry, and now what are you doing in your career now? Obviously your mother, has she retired or is she still working with you?
So mum still works with me a couple of days a week. She's stepped back from the day-to-day management of the business, and I took over about 6 or 7 years ago now. And the business now is more focused on customer-centric business, where we want to focus more on the customer experience and the treatment outcomes for our patients. The industry has changed a lot in the last 10 years or so with the rise of the big chain clinics. It's meant that a lot of the smaller independent clinics have really had to get smart about what their unique service offering is. And given that we can't necessarily compete on price in all of the categories, some things it's just not possible for us to be able to meet those discounted prices. So we've had to get really smart about what direction we want to take and what services we want to offer and what can we do differently than the other clinics out there. So focusing now on a multimodal approach, ensuring that we're looking at the aging process and the skin management process from the inside all the way out. So rather than just looking surface level, we want to think about how does aging actually occur? Where does it start? At what age? And what can we be doing for a client in their 20s all the way through to a client who's in their 50s or 60s, and how we're going to approach them differently?
That's so important, isn't it? Looking at the client in a more holistic way and to ensure that you're actually targeting the root cause of the aging or the skin concern is so important now, we know. You've had so many years of experience, over 10 years of experience as a cosmetic injector, and you've seen a lot of trends come and go. Just what impacts do you think that these trends have on the way that we treat our clients and the more traditional treatments that we're used to performing?
I think that the trends can be seen as both a positive and a negative. I definitely think the positive is that trends are a talking point, and the more people are talking about our services, whether it be good or bad, the more well-known they're becoming. So when we talk about dermal fillers, I suppose the first thing everyone would think of in a negative might be duck lip. What they may not realise is that the people around them that have had some work done, the work has been done really well, it may not necessarily be noticeable, and it really shouldn't be noticeable. So it really depends on how you want to look at it. So again, I just refer back to the rise of the chain clinics. The positive that came out of the chain clinics was the accessibility of our services to a much broader market, to people who would never have necessarily had access to it before. And so the good part of that being that there are people now who are more open to having aesthetic treatments that may have thought that it was only for a particular type of person before. Whereas now you've got everybody from all walks of life, men and women, young and old, who are coming in wanting a bit of a freshen up, focusing on their aesthetic journey, we call it. And it's not a sign of vanity anymore. Now it's more a perspective of, well, this is my self-care. This is how I look after myself. A lot of people come in and say, I feel really tired. I don't want to look really tired. That's their main concern. So I think it's now within everybody's reach. So that was a positive that came out of it. A negative that may have come out of it could be seen as a lot of people who are having treatments that are being overdone, the not so great cosmetic work that's out there. I do believe you can see that in every field. You can see that with cosmetic surgeons. You can see it with cosmetic injectables as well. But ultimately, it comes down to the injector deciding whether or not that particular trend is suitable for that particular patient's anatomy. So once the client walks in the door, it's up to us to decide what we're going to do from there in conjunction with the client, so in consultation with them. But just because there is a particular trend, such as Russian lips, for example, Russian lips may not necessarily suit every lip colour or every lip type. it is important to know that we are selecting the right trend to apply to the right anatomy.
There's so much choice, isn't there? And just with all that choice, I suppose, what would your advice be on actually navigating all of those trends within your clinic and within your staff and your clients? You were saying that some people don't suit certain trends. How would you go about then talking and convincing them otherwise?
So I think it all comes down to education. If I can educate someone about why a particular trend is not going to be suitable for them, and I can offer an alternative to that trend that they're still going to be happy with, then I think that's a much better approach. It all comes down to ensuring that we're respecting the client's anatomy first.
After the break, first, a word from today's beauty partner. Community, creating a skincare range for your salon or spa is easier than you think. With private label skincare, you can create your very own skincare range to support you with both professional salon treatments as well as retail. Private label skincare has curated 2 salon starter packages to suit every level of business, and right now you can receive their 4 brand new professional salon products, including their new AHA peel and their salon course for free, valued at over $500 when you purchase a salon package. Head to privatelabelskincare.com.au to find out more. Thank you so much to the team at Private Label Skincare for making this episode podcast possible.
I always say to my clients, you have to look good when you leave because it's my signature on your face. I want to make sure you look good. I want to make sure people are complimenting you, not looking at you thinking, oh my God, what have they just done? So little things like, for example, when a male client comes into the clinic, most of the time our male clients don't necessarily want to be feminized, and their biggest concern is that these treatments are going to feminize them. They may have seen some celebrities on TV who have had some work done. They may have had some upper blepharoplasties that haven't gone too well and they look a bit too feminine afterwards and things like that. So it's important that we educate the client on what treatment's going to be suitable for them. It's important that we build the trust with the client so that they can understand and they can see that we have their best interests at heart. You know, sadly, I suppose everyone is selling you something in our industry, and to a certain extent, our industry could be seen as benefiting from some people's self-doubt. So I think it's important to find someone, a practitioner and a clinic that can say no to you and feels comfortable saying no to you. And then you know you've found someone who's got your best interests at heart.
That's so important, isn't it? To find someone that you feel comfortable with and that can give you honest and true advice. I love what you said about the aesthetic journey. You called it a journey because it is, for some people, a long-term investment and commitment. So finding the person that you're comfortable with and that you don't feel pressured, of course, as you said, our industry is full of sales, I suppose, for the lack of a better word, but learn you do it with integrity and you do it with the best interests of the patient at heart. That's when something really magical can happen as well.
Definitely. And I think, let's be realistic. We're all here to make a living. We're passionate about what we do. And obviously you need to have passion in order to do something really well and for the long term. But that should never be to the detriment of our patients, and that's one of the principles of nursing. We're always taught to do no harm. We're a champion for patient advocacy. So I've taken that into my cosmetic practice, and it's really served me well to always put the patient's best interest before the interest of the business. And I think you can maintain a long-term relationship with the client that way.
Absolutely. Oh, so well said, Zena. It really is a fast evolving and very quickly changing landscape for aesthetics, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what do you really see happening for the future of cosmetic injectables? There's so many things are happening behind the scenes with legislation and so forth. Are we starting to even come away from and really move further towards or dermal fillers as our first choice of treatment? Or are we starting to come away from that now, do you think?
So interestingly enough, I think we are moving away from dermal filler as our first line of treatment. Having said that, if you're a cosmetic injector and you've only got 2 services that you offer, one being dermal filler and one being anti-wrinkle injections, you're limited with what you can do when that client presents to you with a particular concern. So it's up to cosmetic nurses who are coming into the industry now to ensure that they're well versed in all of the non-invasive options that clients have as well, even if they don't offer it. But at least educate yourself on what devices are out there, what can be done for skin tightening, what can be done for collagen building, what can be done for loss of elasticity and crepey skin. Find out what else is out there, and then ensure that if a client is not suitable for a particular treatment that you offer, such as dermal filler, then just ensure that you know what you can educate the client on aside from what you offer. And if you can build a good relationship with some clinics or some providers of those services, then at least you can refer on. But ultimately, I think it is really important to look at, as a cosmetic nurse, our own skill set and our own scope, and what it is that falls within our scope is a bit of a grey area, as we've seen in the past. So my pathway into this industry came via devices. It came via being in a cosmetic clinic. I had access to IPLs, lasers. I had access to microdermabrasion, peels, skin products, skin care. If you're a cosmetic nurse that's pathway has come via the hospital route and you've got no skin experience and no beauty experience, then you may not necessarily understand what else is out there and how those other treatments work and what's in the best interest of the client. So in answer to your question, I think we are moving away from dermal filler, especially if you have access to those other alternate options. I think we're moving more towards tweakments as opposed to treatments. So this is adding a tiny little bit of filler. So say 1 mil, maybe even 2 mils across the whole face, looking at the cheeks, the lips, the chin, looking at areas where you can create more of a highlight as opposed to adding large amounts of volume, which doesn't necessarily look natural. I think we're definitely moving towards dissolving excess filler. That's a big
Absolutely. That's a big trend right now.
One. And I think you've got to be careful not to dissolve for the sake of dissolving. You need to have a clinical reason to dissolve. And this could be that the filler is migrated. It could be that the tissue is not looking right. It could be for a medical emergency such as a VO. It could be a number of different things. But ensuring that cosmetic nurses are adequately trained in being able to dissolve excess filler, I think is very important. And I think a lot of patients and clients would be surprised to know that there are a lot of nurses out there that unfortunately just haven't had that training. So that's a bit of a concern. But there is another trend that I've noticed, which is the jawline. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes, we certainly have.
They're amazing when they're done well, but they can also have the opposite effect, as in they can make the lower face look wider and look heavier if it's not done right.
Absolutely. So, we've seen some celebrities go a little bit wrong there, haven't we?
Yeah.
In the past year.
That's a big one. I definitely think we're moving away. And me personally, I would say that dermal filler is probably my third or fourth treatment option. And I always aim to subtract before I add. So I want to look at what can I take away. So whether that be skin tightening, lifting, a little bit of double chin fat reduction, whatever the option may be. But I always look at subtracting where there's excess and then look at filler as my probably third or fourth option.
Absolutely. It sounds like you treat in harmony with what you're seeing with the aesthetic of the patient, and you're also using some treatments in symbiosis with each other, and that's always the best outcome as well. Because it's, we always say that if you are filling with dermal filler, very thin or loose skin, it can actually look like you're filling a bag of rocks. we always hear that, don't we? So we want to make sure that that tissue integrity is there and that the skin is in good condition before we attempt to, use things such as dermal fillers as our first choice. And I love the way that you are thinking about it in that holistic sense. So you think the new trends are shaping up for 2022 are more tweakments and a little bit more holistic diversity?
Absolutely. We're talking slow, progressive treatments that look really natural, that respect the client's anatomy, and ensuring that the patient or the client is educated and aware of the pitfalls of some of our treatments. So I often say to my clients, I'll solve one problem, but you'll find in 6 months another one will come up. And it's only because we've potentially solved a problem and now you've noticed something else that was already there, but it just didn't bother you as much because you were bothered by the other thing. Or you may find that, for example, tear trough filler, one of the biggest problems that we have with tear trough filler is, number one, first and foremost, is the expectation from the patient that we're going to be able to completely eliminate the tear trough, even though that may have been the loss of volume in that area may have been that way their whole life. Very difficult to create something where there was no volume there ever to begin with. So if they've always had a negative vector in that area, it's going to be a challenge.
It's managing the client expectations as well.
It is managing their expectations and ensuring that they understand why they're not suitable. And I always like to give my patients the rationale for it, because I don't just want to say, no, that's not going to work, and then just dismiss it, because they've come to us for a reason. They've probably put themselves in a position of vulnerability to express how they feel about that thing that they don't like. So we've got to respect that. And I always like to offer an alternative where I don't think one treatment's suitable. I'll offer something else.
Well, it looks like, you've really got your act at high speed there with all the amazing things that you're doing in your clinic. I think we can learn a lot from you, to be honest. I came away with some great buzzwords, tweakments and aesthetic journey. I loved that. And it's also absolutely about realistic and what's in the best interest of the patient, isn't it? So thank you so much today for coming on our podcast and sharing your expertise and amazing perspective. You have been just a wealth of knowledge, Zena.
Thank you so much, Steph. It's always really good to chat to you.
Absolutely. And we hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thank you. You've reached the end of another episode of the Beauté by ABIC podcast, your online support community for the aesthetic and beauty industry. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay connected.